just to introduce myself, I'm Jeevan Sivasubramaniam. I work at Barracola Publishers, and I've been there over 2 decades. And I'm very happy well, not too happy, but reasonably happy to be presenting this session with the organization I believe in strongly, BK Authors, and you'll hear more about them at the end of this. But we wanted to focus a little bit on what is something that we do sessions all the time where authors talk about their books and their ideas and thoughts. And I think, okay, great, but why don't we try and give authors and editors and writers more information about the industry, or they can just shape up their knowledge that they already have. And so we thought, well, why not start with something that's like a relevant issue right now, which is, I'm going to share my screen here, so give me just a second. And you should be able to see it in full screen now, I hope. And I specifically say nonfiction because fiction editors are still very relevant, but are nonfiction editors even relevant today? This is something that came up for me, and I've discussed with many people, including people in my department, and as well as people at other publishers. And there used to be a time when you could flip through a book without looking at the cover or the spine and everything. And just by flipping through, you could tell if it was self-published or if it had been traditionally published, because you could catch what the editor had done, that it was structured a certain way, that it was flowing a particular way. You used to be able to do that. You can't do that anymore. Even traditionally published books, I've been quite surprised to see recently, going back 7 or 8 years, don't always reflect a high level of editorial intervention. And I'm not sure why. Well, actually, I have my reasoning why. So I did some digging in and actually found, three plus one, and you'll see why I mean by plus one, reasons why I have to argue against publishing and myself and other editors that we perhaps are not as relevant as we once were. But I also want to give 3 reasons why you still can get something of value from them and what you should look for. So with that, let's first look at the 3 reasons why I don't think editors are as relevant as they once were. And the first reason is that author egos have flourished excessively in the age of content being king. The focus is almost entirely on what does an author have to say, not necessarily how is it being said, what is the best way to convey what is being said. This is one of my favorite photos that I show authors. And I tell them, do you know what this is? And most authors are like, it looks like a bunch of mountaineers. I said, actually, that's the line to peak Everest on any given day. Okay, that's how many people on any day at any moment are waiting to stand on top of Everest before the next person. It's like the Las Vegas sign. Everyone stands in line. So I always say, this is the age of author egos. And frankly, yes, this is opinion, but it's informed. You have this age of author egos where every author often feels, I have something very important to say. I'm the only person saying it, and this needs publication. Just like all those people that say, I'm going to climb Everest, I'm going to stand alone. No, there's a whole line of people who've also got the similar goal. And so it's about definitely in this age where the focus is much more on what the author has to say and not how an editor can shape it, the shift has fallen away from editors. Uh, there's an agent named Michael Larson. He heads up Larson Pomada here in the Bay Area, and he's a. I always steal this line from him. He once told me this. He said, you know, and he's been an agent for 45 years now. And he said, you know, no one wakes up in this country and says, yeah, today I'm going to run a sub 4 minute mile. Today I'm going to play the violin like Yehudi Menuhin did. He said, nobody says that, but every day across this great country of ours, people get up and say, yep, today I'm going to write a book. It requires no discipline, no skill, no labor, nothing. It's considered just something everyone can do. And that is a touch of where the author ego comes in. I can do this. I do not require an editor. So that is, and this is the content era. You see it everywhere on social media. And this is one of the reasons why editors are really not that relevant. The second reason is because in the glory days, editors in the glory days, weren't even days, that might have been like 5 decades ago, editors were signing maybe, 7, 8 books a year. That's a bit of a generalization, but it is true. And so they had the time to really, this was not unheard of back in where, you'd sit down with a finished manuscript and a pot of black coffee, and you set aside a whole weekend, and an editor would go line by line through a manuscript with the author right there and all that sort of thing. And they would be able to do it because they had the time. The reason why they can't do that now is because editors are easily signing 3 to 5, but many more than they used to. This is the volume of publishing today. To stay alive, publishers have to put out X number of books, and they rely on editors to sign that many books. And as a result, the editors can't spend the sort of time they'd like to. I heard one editor describe what she does as light dusting. And that term has sort of stuck with me. So this is a situation where, yes, editors are not as relevant because they're not as hands-on as they used to be. And I think books definitely suffer for it. But that is the nature of things. The third reason, and this is an interesting one for nonfiction specifically, editors are no longer editing entire books because nobody reads entire books anymore. They read at best. I think many of you will remember there was that research done when Thomas Piketty's book on Capital came out, and it was a New York Times bestseller, and the Wall Street Journal actually did that bit of research where they were able to look at Amazon Kindle and these e-readers, which tracked how far did people read into the book. And they found that in over 80% of cases, people didn't even read past the introduction. The fact is, no one's reading entire books anymore. So a lot of editors aren't editing the whole book anymore. They're actually just paying attention to the introduction and the openings, perhaps the conclusion. But those, given their time constraints, that's all they're really focusing on. There are entire sections of a book that an editor has not even looked at, has no clue what's even in there. So that is the third reason why editors are not really as relevant as they once were. Now, keep in mind, all of these are referring to more to editors that work in actual publishing houses versus contract and freelance editors who actually sometimes do have the leeway and the time and the resources to be able to spend on a book completely. So, given this wonderful news about what editors do for you, why do you even want to keep having one? Well, there's one thing just to keep in mind before this is something that came up recently, was that the best editors are never the type that have particular egos, or you will notice that in a lot of cases, authors kind of assume, oh, I did this all myself. There are very few authors that will, I don't want to say very few, there are few authors that actually will acknowledge, oh, this is because of the editor that this happened. And that's intentional. The best editors work invisibly. The best way to get your idea across to somebody is to make them believe they came up with it. That's what really good editors do. I mean, I don't do that because I really want everyone to know what I've done, and I get very pissy about it, but that's just me. Didn't say I was good, but many that I've worked with, they wouldn't even be able to, the authors wouldn't even be able to tell you what the work that was done on it. And yet the book is entirely different for it. So I encourage you to keep that in mind as we look at 3 reasons why editors do bring something. And this is one of the rare things you're going to find in this field that you don't find anywhere else. The first big reason why they are relevant, and I can get a good editor's lack of ego is integral to their work. You're not going to find anywhere else, except for maybe social services and nonprofits, where someone's goal is only to make the author look way smarter than they actually are. And they will receive no recognition for this work. And you got to understand the importance of a lack of ego when that is involved. That results in the author and their work getting all the attention. It's hard for me to convey how rare that is in a work world where we all clamor for recognition. Editors are the ones that nobody ever knows. Nobody ever knows what they did, and that's how they function. They're totally fine with it. So having an egoless person in your corner committed to the success of your book is a huge plus. I always tell authors, trust the editor who challenges and debates you. I don't see enough of it happening, and a lot of this is because sometimes it can be difficult to push back. But I will say anecdotally, almost every time I meet an author and they say, oh, I've already got my editor, and they are fantastic. They're excellent. 9 out of 10 times, I'm like, yeah, your editor doesn't debate you at all. They're not a pain. They don't challenge you. They think you're lovely. And of course, we like people who think we're lovely. But I can tell you, personal experience, the best work is work that gets challenged. And trust me, no author is as good as they think they are. So trust the editor to challenge you, encourage them to challenge you. And that's how you get the most out of them. The third and final is that keep in mind there is this delicate balance between everything an author wants to say and the way and what of it is actually worth saying and relevant and important. If it was up to an author, they would say everything because they want to give a reader everything. they don't realize that readers don't want everything. And so there's this diagram you see of the three circles. The author has the content, and no editor is going to tell an author, oh, this content is not valid. The author is the content expert, but the content itself depends entirely on the organization and the delivery of the subject. And that is where the editor is crucial. Otherwise, you just get something that's just sort of an A to Z of all things, which we call those reference books, and nobody gets excited about reference books. So anyway, that's a brief, very brief layout of, 3+ reasons why they are not relevant, and 3 reasons why I still think you can get a lot out of them. So hopefully this has been somewhat informative, and if you have questions now, I'd love to, I think Julie or Jeremy are going through the
We are set. Yeah. So first of all, Jeevan, thank you so much. I forget who it is. I think it's the definition of intelligence is being able to hold two ideas. And clearly this is a couple of some big ideas that we need to hold together. So thank you for so intelligently guiding us through that. Rizwan had a quick question. Can you repeat the average number of books that editors take on today versus recently in the past?
it ranges. It depends on the publishers. Let me say that there's one lady who worked with Emerald, and I'm not going to say where she works now, but they got taken over. And her signing target now are 45 books a year. She was the one who gave me the light dusting. She
Mm.
said, I get a proposal, I look at it and say, yeah, maybe do this, this, and this, and then that's it. It goes into copy editing. She's like, I have no more, I have to find and sign 45 authors. So it really ranges. Some smaller publishers have, smaller, uh, you know, criteria for editors, or not always, but it can range anywhere. I think any editor I know who's signing less than 12 or 15 a year is that's that's a pretty comfortable level.
Wow. Wow. Great. Thank you for that. Farzana is asking, she's curious about what the perception use of AI in publishing is now from an editor's perspective.
I think the thing about AI that's fascinating and frightening is I don't think a lot of people understand how exactly it's used. There are the horror stories. Most of you heard about how Meta, Facebook, how many gigs of illegal download books. I mean, the equivalent of over 40 million illegal downloaded books were uploaded to their AI engine. And but so there's the frightening side of it, but I will sometimes use AI to say, what if somebody sends me like, and I do get this, like a 70-page proposal, like I'll just feed them to AI and say, what are they saying? What are they trying to tell me? So I think there's some resistance to AI as far as certain things. We've had some proposals come to us, some manuscripts that uh, apparently were using AI to be written, and we don't like that. Because you can tell when somebody does that, and it's so it's I know this is like a blundering answer, but it's undecided.
Mhm.
There are some ways in which it's very useful, and other ways in which um, it remains something of an uncertainty depending on. I think what most authors are afraid of is anytime anything is fed into an AI engine, it absorbs it and it will use it. And that is true. It will.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And in addition to questions in chat, maybe if you're using AI creatively, or if you've heard of how AI is being used well, go ahead and pop that in chat as well, and we'll all benefit from that. Dick, and might be a hard question for you to answer, but I'd be curious. How should we recognize BK editors? Because, as you talk about it, it's really a bit of a thankless, behind the scenes, selfless job. What feels good from an editor's perspective? How do you like to be appreciated?
Well, I think we're very fortunate. I think we get great recognition. I'm looking at authors on this call right now, including my authors, including, authors I just finished working with something on, and I'm not going to embarrass her, but Martha wrote one of the nicest messages I've ever gotten from anyone, just saying, wow, you really. So we're very fortunate, but that's because we're a certain kind of publisher. So we attract certain kinds of authors who are more likely to, recognize that. But thank you for asking. But I think it's more, the authors I've dealt with at a lot of other houses. One of the benefits of my job is I get to work with editors, not just freelancers and contract editors, but also editors at various publishing houses all through the Bay Area, and learn from them. And I think some of the other more regular houses like Wiley and stuff, I've some of their editors are like, yeah, my authors don't even know I exist. So.
Well, we clearly at BK know that you exist, Jeevan,
uh,
as well as your colleagues who are editors as well. Gerald is asking, since people don't buy books to read the whole thing, especially long ones, take the Obama books, why do you think people actually buy books today?
I think they have every intention, perhaps, of reading it. I think it's a bit like there's this great Japanese word. There's no literal translation in English. It's called sundoku. And sundoku is the act of buying books when you already have stacks at home sitting unread. I think it's a version of sundoku where we have every intention of it, but then our attention spans are not what they were. As I firmly believe this, and I've been reading so much about it, like as the human race evolves, like we have no patience for anything. We will now this is nonfiction. We want to just learn what we want to learn and move on. And nonfiction books are, for the most part, instructive. They're not entertainment. And so I think people don't read entire books because if they feel that if they can get the gist of the book early on, then that's all that matters, which is why books are so front loaded these days. Nowadays, it's gone to the point where the average nonfiction book, if you read the introduction and the table of contents, you have about 75%.
Yeah, thank you. Melissa is positing that it's important to make the distinction in genre and in types of editor, and wonders if you might speak to that.
Well, I'm going to ask Melissa to unmute herself and ask to elaborate what she means. Do you mean like copy editor versus developmental?
Well, so like when you talk about acquisitions editors, because me, I've worked in acquisitions and as a developmental editor for publishing houses. So for me, there's a distinction between an acquisitions editor and the developmental editor in-house, and then the copy editor in-house. So it just feels like we need to talk about that there's more than one editor, like so do you notice, and I've noticed that some publishing companies are not, like they are using more freelance out of house people. So there's like that, it's all kind of more jumbledy, like, because the acquisitions people
Right.
might not be doing that development, so I was just curious about your experience with that.
Well, I know you had a unique experience, Melissa, where you actually worked at some firms where, the acquisitions was handled by one person, and then the person actually doing the editing was another person. That has not been
Okay.
what I've seen common anywhere else. Usually the person
Oh,
acquiring is the person working. And I think developmental editors, I think they try to hire them when the book merits it. And when I say merits it, it means they think there's enough money to be made where they'll spend the extra money hiring somebody who can come in and actually give the book the time, because you're right, the average editor doesn't have the time to go page by page.
right. So BK, so do you do developmental and acquisitions?
The acquiring editor is also the one who does everything. The developmental is if we get something in that really needs a lot of extra work, that really needs a page by page, we will pull in somebody. In fact, one of the people we pull in is on this call. Danielle Goodman has helped us on countless occasions with many books, where we will ask her to, okay, we need you to, it's not ghostwriting, but it comes close.
Book doctor?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. In the time that we've got, this is so great. We've got some additional questions. And the good news is that Jeevan has committed to 2 more dates in the coming months. So we'll be able to use some of the questions we don't get around to as perhaps a central focus. But in the time that we have, let's see if we can just get a couple of quick additional questions in. Jeevan, Jennifer is wondering about what you're hearing about the quality of editing in hybrid houses.
I think it runs the range. I think it depends on which houses. I mean, there are some, I don't know, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to say them, but I mean, there are some I just tell authors, no, run away quickly, don't even go there. And there are others like Greenleaf where they do, a pretty good job. So it runs the range. The one thing I always tell authors whenever they're working with a hybrid is keep in mind, this is a model where you are the business. Selling the book isn't the business. You are the source. So there is, what I've heard a lot of authors say, is there's a nickel and diming that happens. So you get, like, yes, you'll get X, Y, and Z done for this book. And then if you say, well, I'd like more in-depth editing, okay, that's going to cost you an additional, X, Y, and Z. Or this is going to cost. So I think it's available, but I think it's still a challenge. And then the other challenge is always, and I don't want to say blanketly, because there are many editors who are contract and freelance who don't have a problem doing this. But very often, when the author is the one signing the checks, it's very difficult for an editor to say, yeah, this doesn't work. This doesn't, because this is the editor's livelihood. They stand to actually pay rent if they just go with what the author says. So it's necessary to sort of, recognize that. And this goes back to what I said in the slides, get an editor who really challenges you, trust them first, but then get them to really push you. You'd be surprised how many editors I work with, if they were given permission by the author, genuinely say, okay, push back, really give it to me, how they would just really go above and beyond and deliver something because you're trusting them.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You know, we've gone just a little over, but I think it's time well spent.
I would like to, so in closing, first of all, thank you all for making this. Obviously, uh, I just hope I haven't driven you all away from the next one. It's like, oh, well, this guy was a thrill. But I do want to put a plug in right now for Authors Inc., which is the organization that I'm doing this for and with, because I'm on their board, and also because I support and like them very much, and I don't like anything very much. So I would ask if Jeremy could just drop a few things on screen. And also to all of you, if you have any further questions for me, please email me. I'm going to put my email right now, unless Jeremy already did, I'm not sure, but
I'll take care of that for you, Jeevan. No worries.
okay. But Jeremy, if you could just tell them a little about Authors Inc. and everything.
Yeah. First off, this is my daughter. This is Bridget. She's joining me today. BK Authors Inc. is a nonprofit author organization for all of the authors who are published through Barrett Kohler Publishers. And we also welcome and include any other nonfiction author that is working on a book that will better the world. If you want to sign up for future sessions with Jeevan, well, first off, if you signed up for this session, you're already signed up for the next ones. We will just ping you a reminder. You're welcome to join or not. But you can share it with people by going to bkauthors.org, and here his series is right here. We have a book marketing workshop that's in just over 2 weeks. This is a 3-day workshop that goes in depth on once you've written your book and you have that wonderful developmental editor feedback, hopefully, how do you then market it? How do you build your platform? How do you build a readership base? We have other events throughout the year. You can explore that on here. And if any of you are not on our newsletter yet, you can go to bkauthors.org/newsletter and sign up for our newsletter. We send out tips about writing and marketing and promotion, and notice about our various events throughout the year.
And let me just close with a quote from Martha, which is, Jeevan is a genius, full stop. And I think that we all can agree with that, and a generous genius as well. So Jeevan,
Checks in the mail, Martha, checks in the mail.
thank you, Jeevan. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next Cranky Editorial Guy event. Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really
Bye.
appreciate it. Thanks.